Welcome to the next module in the HAI online training program. This module will be covering the multi-room audio system provided by HAI. The multi-room platform is called Hi-Fi. It's actually Hi-Fi 2, which is the current model. The unit is actually an 8-source to 8-zone multi-room audio system, capable of full switching to switch any source to any zone. It has, and it's available in either its own enclosure, or as you can see from the picture above, or it's available on a structured wiring mounting plate that you can use in our structured wiring enclosure. The systems are actually expandable to 8 sources to 16 zones by using the expander. So the base unit gives you 8 sources to 8 zones, and if you use the expansion it gives you 8 sources to 16 zones. The system is 25 watts per channel, digital D-class amplifiers, and that's into 8 ohm speakers. So it packs quite a punch, giving you 50 watts of audio per zone, so it gives you quite a good output. Just looking at the wiring for the system, and talk you through the various connections. Up in the top left hand corner of the main unit is a row of 8 RJ45 connections. These are used if you want your audio sources to be remote from the main unit, and in that case you use the RIM, the remote input module, which connects via a Cat5 back to these inputs. If your sources are local to the main unit, then they can connect directly using this line of audio connectors here. Over here you have another row of 8 RJ45s. These are used for connecting the VSC, which is the volume source control, which is basically a keypad. That allows you to connect 8 keypads to the main unit for remote control of each zone. The speaker connections are down the bottom here. You can see there's the Phoenix type connectors to connect 8 pairs of speakers to the main unit. Be very careful to ensure that you follow the polarity shown on the little label above, such that you get your positive and negatives correct for your left and right speaker. So that's 8 pairs of speakers can connect down the bottom here. If you're having more than the 8 and you're using the expander, then that connects via a ribbon cable to this connection just here to expand it to 16 zones. The ribbon cable is included with the zone expander. We also have an Ethernet port up here which connects to your LAN for IP connectivity. And we also have an RS-232 port on the main unit for RS-232 control via a third-party control system, or for connection to our HAI main controller. The interface is fully documented, so it's easy to integrate it with third-party systems. Of course, with the HAI controller, that's all understood, and you just connect an RS-232 cable from the RS-232 port up to one of your 5 RS-232 ports on the main HAI controller. Additionally, down here we have variable line outs for zones 1 and 8. So if you have zones where you want to have more than 50 watts of power in that particular zone, you can connect line level out and put that into a power amp. A good example might be a swimming pool area where you might need 4 or more pairs of speakers, and you can connect a line level out from here into the power amp and then drive as many speakers as you want, as loud as you want, and by adjusting the volume on either the VSC or the touchscreen or the iPad app, you then have a variable line out, so you can set your power amp to a specific level and adjust the volume at that line level from the Hi-Fi 2. Additionally, you've got paging input here, so that if you are wanting to make paging announcements, if you refer back to the introductory video, one of the bits of hardware you can add to the main controller is a voice card, which has a line level output, which can connect to one of the audio inputs, and there's a paging output on that card as well, which you connect to the paging input. And when the system wants to make an announcement, it provides a volt-free contact closure which wires into the paging input. When that happens, the Hi-Fi 2 turns all zones on to source 8 at the pre-specified paging volume. So the announcement can be made through the speakers, and then when the volt-free contact releases, the Hi-Fi 2 goes back to whatever it was doing before. And then finally, we also have a trigger out here that if any of the zones are turned on, you get a 12 volt trigger, which you can use to then perhaps turn on if you're using a third party power amp. For that swimming pool example, you can actually turn that amplifier off and on from that 12 volt trigger. So that's the main connections to connect in a Hi-Fi 2 multi-room audio system. The VSC keypad is quite a lot of functionality that this provides and with a relatively inexpensive keypad solution. You've got a 2-line OLED display which displays your volume level and what zone you're in, and when used with the HAI iPod dock that we'll come to later, it will also display album and artist and track information will scroll across that display. Button wise, you've got a plus and a minus, power and source selection. So the plus and minus normally are for volume, power is a toggle off on, and your source scrolls you through your sources. However, once if a zone's turned on by pressing plus and minus together, that then gets you into the EQ menu where you can adjust bass, treble, loudness and balance. And you also have a zone setup functionality when if the zone's turned off and you press and hold the source key, then that gets you into the setup menu where you can then specify which zone this keypad is controlling. So the actual physical connection to the RJ45 on the Hi-Fi 2 does not predetermine which zone you're in. You can pretty well connect them to any input on the keypad connections on the Hi-Fi 2, and you specify which zone this keypad is controlling via this setup menu. That also allows you to have multiple keypads controlling the same zone if you want. So once you're into the setup menu, you can select which zone you're controlling. You can enable and disable sources. So if you only have 2 sources, for example, or 3 sources, and when you press the source button, rather than having to scroll through all 8 sources, you can disable the sources you're not using, so it only scrolls through the ones you're using. You can adjust the gain per source, so if you have some devices which are outputting higher line level outputs than others and you scroll through the sources and the volume jumps, you can adjust that by adjusting the gain on each source, so as you scroll through sources you'll have a common volume level through each source. You can also set up the initial power on volume, so that when you turn the zone on, what volume does it come on at. And you can also adjust the paging volume, so you can set the paging volume so that when paging announcements are made, that obviously determines how loud they are. The VSC connects back to the main Hi-Fi via Cat5, so on the back of the VSC is an RJ45 connection on the rear. And currently it is a US JBox form factor, so you do need an American backbox for first fix for the VSC. The RIM, the remote input module, as I mentioned before, that's only used if you want your sources remote from the main Hi-Fi 2 unit. If you have them locally, you do not need this. Your sources can connect directly to the main Hi-Fi 2 unit. However, if you want your sources remotely, then this is the device to use. So you've got an audio input and an IR output with an IR emitter for IR control and an RJ45 on the back for Cat5 connection back to the main unit. This is the only way of having IR control of the source. There is no IR outputs on the main unit. So if you need IR control of the source, you need to use a RIM. Again, it requires a single JBox for first fix. And then we have a variant on the RIM, which is Bluetooth. So it has the same IR out audio in as the previous RIM, but it also has Bluetooth built in, which is great for connecting mobile devices and streaming off of iPhones and Android devices, because you can just connect via Bluetooth, and then whatever you've got, either music on the device or internet radio or Spotify, Napster, those sorts of things can be streamed and Bluetoothed to this RIM. The range is about 10 meters, so you do need that to be within 10. You need to be within 10 meters of this device in order to get a good solid Bluetooth connection. So good for bedrooms and auxiliary rooms. There is also a iPhone app for the Hi-Fi system. It's a free download off the App Store, and it basically mimics the VSC. It actually looks and feels like a VSC for volume, source selection, and obviously power. And obviously the app can run on an iPhone or an iPad. That obviously requires a Wi-Fi connection back to the LAN. And on setup, you initially just discover the Hi-Fi 2 on the network, and it will discover it to specify its IP address. Obviously, you must give the Hi-Fi 2 a static IP address for this to work continuously. Otherwise, if your IP address on the Hi-Fi 2 changes, you'll have to rediscover it, which is not the end of the world, but could be annoying to an end user. So that's another great way of controlling the Hi-Fi 2. We can also control the Hi-Fi 2 audio system via the HAI 5.7e touchscreen. This does require you to have a controller. We'll go on to some standalone options later, but the Hi-Fi 2 can be used as a standalone multi-room audio system, and a lot of the functionality we're talking about right now is available to you. However, if you want to use a 5.7e for control, then it must have an HAI controller in the system. For setting up the Hi-Fi, there is a utility to free download off our website and the HAI website. This utility allows you to set up the IP address and zone names. I'm now going to just switch to that app, and here it is. So this app, say it's a free download. When you first run it up, you need to connect to the Hi-Fi, so you just pull down the connection menu and go to connect via the network, and there's a handy discover option, and it'll go out and it'll discover the Hi-Fi on your LAN, and there it is. So once you've selected that, you can then hit connect. So we're now connected to the Hi-Fi. Mine is set up already with a static IP address on my network. By default, it's set up for DHCP, so it will get an IP address dynamically off your router. To set it up with a static IP, you need to set this to DHCP disabled and set your IP address that you've predetermined for it in here, and your subnet mask, and the default gateway is obviously the IP address of your router. No need to change these parameters over here. You need to leave them as default. There's no need to actually change those. And then you just simply go write configuration to Hi-Fi. That will then write that information down to the Hi-Fi unit. You do need to reboot the unit in order for it to pick up its new network configuration. Then you can run up the utility. Obviously by rebooting it or disconnect it. Once it's rebooted, then you can then rediscover it, and you should find it's now using your static IP address. That'll be the first thing to do. Once you've done that, you can then move into the source tab, and then you can start specifying your source names. by just typing in what your source names are, and by typing something in here, then what happens is that is then what is displayed on the VSC keypads. So if you don't change those, the keypads will say source 1, source 2, source 3. By customizing them here, the keypads will, in this situation, will now say iPod and Bluetooth. And if you only have 2 sources on the system, then you can disable the other sources. So when you're pressing the source button on the keypad, it will then only scroll between the 2 sources rather than having to keep scrolling through all 8. Which makes it usability much easier. And this is where you can also customize the gain. So again, if you have a source which is a bit quieter than others, you can then boost its gain slightly, so as you scroll through the sources you get that nice continuous level of volume rather than jumping volumes. Zones, here I'm able to customize my zone names so that I can make them user friendly, as opposed to saying zone 1, zone 2 and zone 3. I can disable zones that I'm not using. I can adjust the sort of default treble, bass and balance, and whether or not there's loudness applied. I can specify the initial volume and the paging volume via this utility. And I can also set up groups. I can set up a zone group. I can have up to 8 zone groups simply by specifying 0 means it's not part of a group. If I specify 1 or 2 or 3, then I can actually start grouping zones together. And then on the groups tab, I can then specify the behavior of those groups. So by default, as soon as you put zones into a group, they will then be locked to the same source. So if I change source, a good example might be a master bedroom and the ensuite. So if I change source in the master bedroom, then the ensuite will change as well. No problem having 2 keypads, a keypad in the bedroom, a keypad in the ensuite. I can adjust the volume independently, but as I change source, then the sources change together. Might also use that in a really big open plan kitchen diner scenario where I need 2 pairs of speakers, so I could then group them together so it becomes one group. But on this screen I can also customize other aspects of the grouping. So by default it's just the same source, or I can have same source and same volume. So if I adjust the volume on one keypad, they're on one pair of speakers, the other pair will adjust the volume as well. That will be great for the kitchen diner example, where you would want to operate perhaps all 4 speakers together. Whereas in the master bedroom ensuite scenario, you probably wouldn't do that because you might want to have different volume levels in the bedroom versus the ensuite. So that gives you that flexibility. And then lastly, you've got the option to also have this locked to the same source, volume and EQ. So if I adjust the bass or treble or loudness or balance on one keypad, then the other zone will change as well because they're all part of the same group. This function is also pretty good for commercial applications. If you've got a restaurant, let's say, with a big restaurant that requires 8 pairs of speakers, you just need one keypad. You can just create one group, put all the speakers, put all the zones into one group, one keypad, perhaps behind the bar, and then they can adjust the volume once and all 8 pairs of speakers will go up and down together if I've specified same source and same volume. And again, I can switch source together as well between perhaps the radio or the CD player or the iPod or whatever. So that's pretty handy for commercial applications. The last tab allows me to actually customize the labels. So as I go into the menus on the actual VSC, I can get into treble and bass, as I mentioned earlier, and I can change those words if I want to. Can't really see a need to do that, so I'll probably just leave them as default. But obviously, I've also got some predefined templates for other languages that I can load in. Again, might be useful if it's an Italian restaurant and you want to be able to provide that information in native language. You can do so from here. Once you've customized it all, again, it's simply a matter of going connection and write configuration to Hi-Fi 2, and that will write that information down to the Hi-Fi 2 audio system. Worthwhile probably doing a save as, so you've saved that configuration file on your computer, so you've got that saved for later purposes. Don't worry if you don't, because you can always go back to site and go read from a Hi-Fi 2, and then you'll upload the configuration from the Hi-Fi 2 into the utility. So quite flexible, and the utility makes the configuration quite simple. Another accessory we can add on, which is very powerful, is the HAI iPod dock. This docking station is either available as a wired or wireless. That refers to the IP connection, because there's full metadata is provided from this device. I mean the full catalogue of the audio on the iPod becomes available either to the Snaplink mobile, iPhone and iPad app, or to the 5.7e touchscreen. So some people will just put this iPod dock tucked away in a cupboard out the way. It's a very inexpensive music server. The customer might buy a 64 gig iPod Touch and put that in there, and never have to pull it out, because you can access and select what to play from the iPhone and iPad app or the 5.7e touchscreen. And with the power of iTunes, the customer can buy music on his iPhone, and with the iCloud technology, that will automatically get downloaded to his iPod Touch in the cupboard, and then he can access the music from the system without having to pull the iPod out. So it's a pretty inexpensive music server solution. The back of the unit has got an RJ45 for Ethernet, which should connect to your Ethernet network if you're going wired. I say there is a wireless version as well if you don't have an Ethernet connection handy. There's an audio output on there, so you have to have an audio interconnect from here, from the iPod dock back to the Hi-Fi. That can either go via a RIM, which would be the logical choice if the iPod dock is remote from the Hi-Fi, or if it's local to the Hi-Fi 2, then you can connect directly to it without the use of the RIM. And of course it also needs power. It needs a power connection. Quite useful as well. A lot of iPod docks that allow remote control and access to the library of the music on the iPod often lock you out, and you cannot get to the when you select the music icon on the iPod Touch or iPhone that's plugged in, or just the main menu on the iPod, if it's an iPod Classic, you can't then use it locally anymore. Whereas this one here has got a button on the actual, there's a little button that's on the actual top here on the right hand side that toggles you between kind of network control mode versus local mode. So if you press that button, you lose control via the touchscreen or the Snaplink mobile app, but you then get control back at the iPod. That's very useful if you want to stream music from Spotify or Napster or internet radio apps, or you just want to select what music you want to play from the music library on the iPhone or iPod locally. And then tapping that button again will put you back into network control mode, where you then get control back from a 5.7e or the Snaplink. So that's quite flexible. It's quite a nice feature. It allows you to control it locally if you want to. With the Snaplink iPhone app, the HAI Snaplink iPhone or iPad app, this is the sort of screen you get when you're controlling your music from an iPod plugged into the iPod dock. As you can see, it pulls the artwork off the iPod. That does assume the artwork is properly on the iPod in the first place. So provided the artwork's there, then you get the artwork up on the control from the this is from an iPhone, but it works also on an iPad. And I can skip forward, skip back, play and pause, turn the zone off and on, adjust the volume. The middle button here will get me into the music library, where I then can select by album, artist, song, playlist, podcast. And this button here allows me to change source on the Hi-Fi 2, so I can select between, in my example earlier, I've got an iPod in source 1 and just a Bluetooth rim on source 2. That button would allow me to switch between sources. So that's quite a nice feature and very easy to use. And of course you can access the full content of the iPod in the iPod dock from the 5.7e touchscreen, which provides you a screen. Again, you can see from this screenshot you have the artwork, artist, album and track name, and again you can skip forward, skip back, play and pause, adjust the volume. I've got additional features here where I can put it on repeat and shuffle, as well as going into the full music catalogue to search by album, artist, playlist, podcast, song, that kind of stuff. So nice integration. Again, if you want to use the 5.7e, there has to be an HAI controller in the system. So the Hi-Fi 2, as I mentioned, can be used as a fully standalone multi-room audio platform, very capable. So this kind of chart is really just to explain that. So if it is a standalone multi-room audio system, then I have my Hi-Fi 2. I can be using my rims and my Bluetooth rims if I want to. And I can use the VSC keypads, again optional, don't have to. I could decide to control the whole thing from either the Snaplink mobile iPhone app or the Hi-Fi iPhone or iPad app. So, you know, in a very simple system, I could just buy my Hi-Fi 2 and download this app, and that will allow me to switch between sources and turn each zone off and on and select the volume for a very, very simple system controlled wirelessly from an iPad or an iPhone. If I add an iPod dock, then I will need to use the Snaplink iPhone app, because that will be the only way for me to select the content of what I want to play from the iPhone remotely, unless of course I'm going to do it all locally at the iPod dock. But for the very inexpensive app from the App Store, it would make sense to use this app, because now I can select album, artist, playlist, song, podcast and so on. So if you have a scenario where you've got a house that's cabled with speaker cable, and there's no Cat5 connectivity for keypads, then that's a great solution. You can use the Hi-Fi 2 main assembly and use the Snaplink iPhone app, and it gives you full control. And you can add the iPod dock, gives you full control from any room, provided you've got good wireless coverage, of course, without any keypads. If you have got Cat5 to each keypad location, then you can add the VSCs, purely optional, but a very flexible standalone multi-room audio platform. If you have got an HAI controller in the system, then you can also add your 5.7e touchscreen as well for control functions, including controlling the audio. So a couple of options, and then of course with a controller in the system, you can also provide whole house, scenes. If you have a go to bed scene, a go to bed mode, that might arm the alarm, turn your lights off, and turn the audio off, which is obviously all programmed from the HAI controller. Obviously all that, if you have got a controller in the system, then there's a bit of work to do with PC access, which I'm sure you're getting familiar with now. I'm just going to jump over to PC access right now. So if you have got a controller in your setup of your system, you will need to specify one of the serial ports, because the connectivity from the controller to the Hi-Fi 2 is via RS-232. Yes, there is an Ethernet port on the Hi-Fi 2 that's used for the iPhone control and pulling the and for metadata feedback from the iPod up onto the VSCs. But for basic control from the HAI controller, it's done via RS-232. So one of your serial ports needs to be specified as the Hi-Fi 2, and as soon as you set one of the serial ports as Hi-Fi 2, then the audio source and audio zone menu items appear in the setup tab. So obviously it's fairly straightforward. For sources, you name your sources, match them up with the source names you used in the Hi-Fi 2 utility, and the same for the zones. You name your zones, again match them up with the zone names in the Hi-Fi 2 utility. As simple as that. Just going back to the serial port, whilst of course the Hi-Fi 2 is a brilliant audio system and we'd encourage you to use that, we have got third-party connectivity options as well. We can also connect to third-party audio systems, which you do need to have a Pro controller to make use of those third-party integration options, which is why they're not in my menu list here, because I'm using an Omni 2E for this particular demonstration. Should this be a Pro, then I would also have in this menu of items the Nuvo system, the Speakercraft mode system, the Proficient audio system, and the Xantec system as well. So they'll also plug and play, integrate with an HAI controller for audio integration, and they would be in the menu list here if this was a Pro. On a 2E you don't have those options, you only have the Hi-Fi 2 as your audio system to interconnect with. So let's imagine we wanted to do some funky programming. We go into the automation tab, and let's say example, when we arm the alarm in away mode, we want to turn the audio off automatically. So to do that, we would go in and add a new automation block, and the trigger in that scenario would be security. And so let's say I'm turned the set the security into away mode in all areas, any code, any user, and I want it to happen at the beginning of the exit delay, so that when I arm the alarm I hear the audio go off straight away. That's my trigger, and then I simply got to set up an action. I'm arming the alarm in away mode, so I want to turn the audio zone, all audio zones off. Simple as that. So now whenever I arm the alarm, I can do that with all my music blaring, and all the audio zones will automatically turn off when I arm the alarm. That's that bit of automation programming there. Let's say when I come home and disarm the alarm, let's say perhaps I like to bring the music on throughout the house or in certain zones. So let's write another automation block to see how we'd do that. Again, the trigger would be security, and this time I'm turning the alarm off. So off is the option I want in any area and for any user, and I could customize that to be Dad's user, let's say in this case, just for the sake of it. So it only happens when Dad's code is used, and the action here would be audio zones. So I'm going to turn them all on. So all audio zones will get turned on by doing that. I have the option to set the volume, per zone, but if I don't use that, it'll default to the normal volume on that we've specified earlier. And source wise, they will all come on to source 1. I might be happy with that, but if I want to change that, I can then go in and say audio source iPod. I have to do this now for each zone. So if I specify audio source iPod for each of my audio zones, I can do that relatively quickly, just for 3 zones, let's say. So now when Dad comes home and disarms the alarm, all audio zones get turned on, and they all get set to the iPod audio source. So now we've got some music playing whenever you come home and disarm the alarm, and that's the automation block that we've just added just now down here. So fairly straightforward, relatively easy to do. I've also got some other examples up here of macros for a night mode. So when I go to bed, I've got a button on my touchscreen on my iPhone app that I can run night mode, and as you can see, that actually announces night mode through the speakers. turns all my audio zones off, turns my lights off, arms the alarm in night mode, and sets all my thermostats back to a nighttime temperature. In the morning I might select day mode, which disarms the alarm, runs a lighting scene, turns the audio on to the iPod at 15% and sets all the thermostats to a day mode. So you can see how with these sort of whole house scenes or modes, you can incorporate audio, lighting, heating, security at a single button push. So that really gives you a quick overview of the HAI Hi-Fi 2 multi-room audio platform. As you can see, it's fairly straightforward, very easy to install, either as a standalone system or as part of an overall HAI system. It's fairly plug and play and easy to set up. For more information, there's lots of resources available to you from the HAI website. And also from our own website as well, which is www.ordersystems.co.uk. You can follow us on Twitter, which is just Order Systems. You can find our corporate Facebook page on Facebook by searching for Order Systems, or you can email us at sales@ordersystems.co.uk, or of course you can call us on 01296 719 582. Hope you found this useful. And you'll tune in for further of our training modules. Thank you very much.